the Monday, September 23rd, 2019 meeting of the Norton Conservation Commission. First item is an Eagle Scout proposal for Franklin Cropley for an osprey nesting platform on Norton Reservoir.
Hello, my name is Franklin Cropley, and this is my Eagle Scout project named Operation Osprey. Thank you. My name is Franklin Cropley. I'm 16 years old. I'm a junior at Norton High School. I'm like Frank, which is one below Eagle. So I've been scouting for 10 years, like 6 in Boy Scouts, 4 in Cub Scouts. I've camped more than 150 nights, and I've earned 33 merit badges. I have served as the senior patrol leader, troop guide, and quartermaster. I've completed the National Youth Leadership Training, and I'm going to work to teach, be an instructor for the National Youth Leadership Training. And then I went on a 12-day hike in Philmont this summer, and then I plan on going to Sea Base, which is like a ship thing in the Florida Keys next summer. Mark Bruda is my sponsor, and Dave Lennon is my consultant. The objective for my Eagles project is to build a nesting platform on the Norton Reservoir to provide a home for the ospreys, which have been rebounding since the DBT in the 70s. They've been rebounding, and we've started to get more ospreys around the Norton area. So building an osprey nest would be a good habitat for them. These are just some educational videos. I don't know if they work right now. It's just like the Wi-Fi or something like that.
Not likely, but
All right.
are those for reference that you used for reference in your project?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's just basic facts about ospreys, and then it shows some of the nests too. So I thought it was cool. Like I said a little earlier ago, the ospreys are coming to the Norton Reservoir area, and there's one on a cell tower on Mansfield Avenue, and if we can create a safer home for them, it would be much easier. That photo is of an osprey platform that was on a power, like on the high power lines, and they're moving it there because it can be dangerous for the bird and can start like fire or something like that. Could electrocute them. There's a small island on the reservoir where it is. It's right around that area. If you actually see the island, it's like a small little spit, and I haven't found any maps that really have it located on it. Yeah, so it's very small. In the water in between, it has a couple inches of water, and we plan on putting an osprey platform there, so we don't have to like clear any brush out or anything like that. It'll be straight up in between the trees. That's another photo. Yeah, I went with Mr. Lennon, who owns the Norton Kayak Company. We went out on kayaks to the place and looked at some photos. So, yeah, I'm asking for your approval from the Norton Conservation Committee. And then there's a Scout Committee, and well, be closed to October now, but like the beginning of October. And yeah, fundraising construction can start right after that, pretty much immediately. So it's a 6x6 platform that would be around 12 feet tall. The cedar pole would be dug 3 to 4 feet into the ground. We'll put a PVC piping in it so it can protect from environment and the predators can't climb up the PVC. So wood for the platform, that'd be like 2x4s and 2x6s. And the 12 pound bags of concrete is more on the liberal side of how much concrete we need. But it's only like $6 for a 80 pound bag of concrete mix. But the challenge would be bringing it over, which we're relying on a pontoon boat provided by someone who lives on the reservoir that we have talked to and are friends with. Yep, so via the pontoon boats, and then Troop 61 does have 7 or 8 canoes they have on a rack, and I've asked the scoutmaster and he said yes. So we're all set on the canoes and the boat. Those would be for kids, supplies, like everything would be transported that way. PVC, and then dug, 4 inches into the ground, which would be sort of a challenge, but the plan is to like box it off and then drain it a little bit. It's only a small spot to dig the 4-foot hole and put the pipe in. I mean, not like the hole in. We cannot use pressure treated wood. We plan on using cedar instead of pressure treated because the pressure treated wood has arsenic, I think, in it, and it's obviously not good for the water. All power tools have to have batteries because Island does not have electricity, and there are certain restrictions for what children can and cannot use. So for the troop, ages like 11 to 16 have certain requirements, 16 to 18, and then any adult can use kind of anything. And then I would have to provide safety equipment for the troop. And then along with that, there would be an educational portion to educate the public about the ospreys themselves. And we're planning on putting flyers in a little flyer distributor. And there's a little kiosk at the boat landing. We plan on putting the flyer distributor there. So people can, at the boat landing, can grab those, especially since the osprey platform is right on the lake. And then I think that's kind of it. Yeah, so there's a little kiosk there, and we'll attach it there, and then we plan on printing like 100 to 150 paid flyers that have a lot of info. Thank you, Conservation Commission, for letting me present this project.
Were you able to see the platform from the kiosk?
I'm not
in line of sight?
I'm sure. I couldn't see the island per se because it's a pretty small island,
Right.
but like the 12 feet up in the air could be
Right.
a lot different.
But there are trees right next to it that are probably more than that, it seems, on that little.
Yeah, those are like 10 feet tall trees.
So the pole itself will go in soil that is currently covered by an inch or 2 of water, is that correct?
Yes.
So you'll bring in sandbags to kind of dike it off so that you can empty the water out and then work in a small confined area?
Yes. It would be a lot more difficult for there to be 2 to 3 inches of water and then digging 4 feet down because they would collapse in on itself.
Yeah.
So just boxing it off is like how they've done it historically speaking. And
Do we have an ability to lower the water a little bit in Gilbert?
If the highway department does that for flood storage.
I mean, 2 or 3 inches would be reasonable if you want to live in the working room, because it can become a mess with everything totally water soaked. Just bringing the water down 3 or 4 inches may make it much more feasible.
It's not a bad idea. I mean, you can coordinate with the highway superintendent and see when he plans to do that for like a winter drawdown, and
Yeah,
schedule.
definitely, because that could save some money on just the boxing it off in the first place.
A lot of work and a lot of aggravation.
Yeah. Be a
Get
lot
more
of-
out of
I mean,
saving a lot of time in the long run.
you'll still have to box it off probably a little bit, but if you can actually work on a dry surface or.
Starting with that surface. yeah,
Start,
absolutely.
because it's gonna start infiltrating in, and you're gonna have to find a way to work with that.
So how did you choose this location?
Um,
Or why did you choose this location, I should say?
It was just a good spot because there's already a shallow amount of water. It'd be a lot more difficult for, say, on like one of the bigger islands because there'd be a lot of trees already there. So a nice little, it's a lot flatter than most of the other islands. And then we wouldn't really have to clear any brush or anything like that beforehand. So we can go straight into the construction part.
Oh, I do have a question about your concrete. So I assume, well, I shouldn't assume, where are you gonna mix the concrete? So you're gonna take the bags over in the pontoon, are you going to mix it on the island, or are you gonna mix it beforehand and take it, which it could set by the time you get to? Do you know that?
We would probably mix it on site. Mr. Ruda, can you help me out on this one?
I think the concrete would be mixed as we need it.
Yeah.
And it would be mixed right there, right on site.
Okay.
You mean in the boat, I think is what she's asking.
Yeah, either-
Is the staging area on the island, does it have wetlands? I mean, from what I saw, I didn't know if it was the actual island, it was filled with frag.
I don't
Oh,
know that there's a whole lot of
oh, this-
island there.
okay.
Yeah, you can get a mixing bucket, plastic mixing bucket that would be very suitable. They're about, I don't know, 2 by 3 feet.
Yeah.
And that deep, so.
It's a little at a time.
Well, you mix, if you really want to be aggressive, you mix a whole 8-pound bag, but that takes a little bit of effort. You may want to do half and half. This is all pre-mixed, right? It's
Yes.
Sand, yeah, so you may want to just mix half a bag at a time in one of those mixing buckets. And it's very easy to do that.
So Jennifer, do we need any BMPs in the waterway, or? It's so shallow, we can't really put up a curtain or anything.
Right.
It's too shallow.
Well, I mean,
Yeah,
I think
it's too
that's
shallow.
where drawing the reservoir down 6 inches, and fortunately now, we're getting less of a tremendous amount of rain, and it's drawing itself down.
Yeah, they're actually doing it during the rainiest month, but it would be better to do it in like August, but I know you can't help it, it's past that now, so, yeah. So, I guess that would help, if we could draw it down a little. But, okay.
Any other questions?
I have 1 or 2 comments. Frank, I think this has been an excellent presentation. This morning I heard on NPR that the Cornell Lab of Ornithology has said that there are now 3 billion fewer birds in the U.S. than there were in 1970.
That's right.
So I think this is a timely project and an excellent project. Kudos to you and kudos to your sponsors and supporters.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anyone else?
Okay, so I think he's looking for an approval.
I mean,
If everybody's good with it, then just give him a yes.
yes, very good. Thank you, Frank.
Bye.
Aye.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we,
So that's his. Okay. So all I gotta do to take it out. Yeah.
okay, next item is a discussion of open meeting law with
I think
KP
that's
Law.
it. Please. Yeah.
Where would you lay best? Here? Is good?
Sure.
Okay. Do you mind?
Oh, no,
Okay, great.
I mean, thought I had space.
No worries.
Do you want to not have that?
Never space.
I don't take up a ton. Thank you. No worries.
There's a little signature part for the fundraising section.
Use the remote to shut that off, so it's not.
Yeah, it's on your desk. Yeah.
Like this one. Oh, I gave you.
No, it's fine. I'm good.
It won't go up. It's hard to trim with my pen.
Good night.
Thank you all for having me tonight. Nice to see you all again. My name's Janelle Austin. I've met some of you before. I work at KP Law, and I regularly advise communities on public records law issues and open meeting law issues. We've scheduled a training tonight just to go over, what I say is the highlights of the open meeting law. We really want to use the session as just a touch point to go over the law and where it currently stands, based on guidance we receive very frequently from the Attorney General's office. This will be a general overview, so if there are any specific questions, I'd certainly be happy to address those through Jennifer after the meeting, but certainly we want to just go over the highlights a little bit. And feel free to stop me if anything, you want me to focus on anything in a little bit more detail, and because we will be breezing through the material, so to speak. So open meeting law, public records, and conflict of interest laws exist in almost every state, as you all know. And the purpose of the law is to eliminate secrecy or, backroom deals, so to speak, and to enhance transparency in governmental functions. So under the open meeting law, public bodies can conduct business through public meetings held in accordance with the open meeting law, unless there's a certain exemption that applies or a purpose that applies to go into executive session. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. So what in essence are the open meeting law legal requirements? There are requirements for meeting notices, how the Conservation Commission has to post its meetings. And what does that mean? It means it has to be posted in a timely fashion. It needs to be posted at the location the town has designated. And it needs to have a sufficient amount of detail so that the meeting notice alerts members of the public whether he or she may want to attend the meeting. There are also minute requirements. The minutes have to be accurate. They have to be timely prepared and approved. The Attorney General's office says it doesn't need to be a transcript of the Commission's proceedings, but it needs to certainly give members of the public enough information that they know what transpired at the meeting. So if they weren't there, they would get essentially a gist or a sense of the meeting. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail as well. There were some significant changes to the law in 2017, and that's why it is good to do this training on an ongoing basis. The Attorney General's office provided additional guidance on how frequently the minutes have to be approved, among other things, and we'll talk about that as well. So let's start at the beginning, so to speak. What is a meeting for purposes of the open meeting law? And that is broadly defined to include a deliberation amongst a quorum to discuss matters within the jurisdiction of, in this case, the Conservation Commission. It doesn't include on-site inspections of a project or program, and here's the caveat, as there are always them. You cannot deliberate if you are at a site inspection. And the Attorney General's office has issued several determinations recently saying that if a quorum of the public body goes to an on-site inspection, that there really shouldn't be discussion at that meeting. So what do we recommend? We recommend you post a follow-up meeting of a board or a committee if you anticipate that there will need to be discussions. And sometimes a representative will go to the inspection and report that back to the full commission. That's one way that those issues are dealt with. The term meeting, and this is all a good thing, doesn't include if all of you want to go to a fun event, if you want to go to a social gathering, if you want to attend a community event, as long as you don't deliberate on matters before the commission. And so what we recommend is always avoid creating the appearance of that. If a resident comes up to you and says, can I talk about XYZ project? What's your thought on that? You can say, well, happy to hear what you have to say, but then we certainly don't want to call over several other members of the commission because that would give the quote-unquote appearance that there is business of the commission being discussed. So the other interesting part about this is that the meeting does not include attendance at a quorum at another public body meeting. So if you attend a planning board meeting, that wouldn't necessarily constitute a meeting of the Conservation Commission, but you should be clear that you're only discussing it as an individual and that you're not representing the public body. Or the alternative to that, which is never a bad idea, is to post a joint meeting, and then if several members show up, it certainly covers the commission for purposes of the open meeting law. So what is a deliberation? We now have many opinions of the Attorney General's office interpreting what a deliberation is, but the definition is fairly broad. It's an oral or written communication through any medium, including electronic mail, between or among a quorum of a public body on any public business within its jurisdiction. So clearly, very broadly defined. And the inference is that if it involves items before the Conservation Commission within its jurisdiction, and there is that deliberation, then it could constitute, it could be covered by the open meeting law. These are the items that don't constitute, as long as no opinions are discussed, a deliberation. And these come up all the time with communities that I work with. If there's providing a meeting agenda by email, scheduling or procedural information, or reports or other documents that you would need to review before the meeting. So those are all fine to email, and a lot of communities, and I know you guys do it as well, caution to not reply all under those circumstances. A trending issue that is on all of our minds in this day and age that has really exploded over the past decade that I've been doing open meeting law work is email and social media. We all use email all the time for everything, and so the Attorney General's office does explicitly address that issue in the open meeting law, and we always want to beware of replying all on emails and limit it to scheduling purposes. We don't want to ask for opinions or beliefs in emails, and certainly we would want to save that for a public meeting, which I know you guys are all aware of and conscious of. Social media is a new item that we're seeing more and more of in the open meeting law context. If people are texting each other, sending Twitter messages to one another, sending Facebook or posting Facebook posts on one another on matters before the Conservation Commission, and there's an ongoing exchange that could constitute a deliberation, and so we recommend that those aren't directed to other members of the public body. And if it does it, you might want to consider not engaging, because if it's then several members, a quorum of the commission, then that could be, it could implicate the open meeting law. Obviously, be thoughtful about manners in which comments are made, and this doesn't apply to you, but we always recommend if there was a campaign purpose, you'd want to put that on separate email chain. So what could constitute a violation if there was an email, a voicemail, an IM, posting or blog that's then sequentially forwarded to one member from another member? They call it a chain email. And then by the end of that chain, if it ends up that a quorum of the commission has that email, that could constitute or implicate the open meeting law, or a web-based discussion, as I mentioned before. Any questions on that before I move on?
I assume that if we're talking about the Conservation Commission of Plainville, that's we can say pretty much whatever we want about it.
So as long as it's not
As
a
long as
matter
it-
before your jurisdiction, within
Okay.
your jurisdiction, yes.
But
And
are there commissions who would actually conduct any kind of information exchange on social media? I would think that would, the difficulty is it would cut the public out.
That's correct. So the overarching purpose of the open meeting law is that the business of the commission should take place at a meeting that members of the public can attend. A meeting of the commission should be ADA accessible, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. And so essentially, everyone's an individual here, and you have First Amendment rights to comment on things in your individual capacity. However, if there's an exchange, and how we often see it is, a certain electronic exchange that gets forwarded to multiple people within a matter that's within your jurisdiction, then that would implicate the open meeting law. If it's something, heavy, an email to one person, did you see what this Conservation Commission did in another community? If it could potentially impact what this commission does, it's very fact specific, as you might imagine.
I think probably the chances of me talking about another conservation commission on the social media
Twitter.
is very, very, very slim. But I do always, I often mention the environment in my posts, just not the local environment. Or anything under my jurisdiction.
So we can skim over the next section because the Conservation Commission clearly is a public body subject to the open meeting law. You are within government, you're empowered to act collectively, and you certainly serve a public purpose. If there was a question, if the Conservation Commission ever created a subcommittee, we could certainly discuss the legal implications of that. Scheduling meetings, this is another item that's worth consideration over the open meeting law. Locations need to be accessible. The location of a meeting, such as what you guys do, must be included in the notice. We recommend that if you know a meeting is going to be moved from one floor or one location to another, try to amend the notice as soon as you can, or put signage up to indicate that it's been moved. The accessibility requirements are required by both the open meeting law and the Americans with Disabilities Act. And we talked a little bit about site inspections, but some practical implications or considerations include if you're meeting at a specific location that may or may not be accessible and members of the public can't attend because it's private property, that may be a circumstance where you want to send one member of the commission to then report back, because moving it might be, especially within the items within the commission's jurisdiction, it might be difficult to have certain locations ADA accessible.
Are you in violation if you have anything less than a quorum? If it's, say, 3 people, in our case, could that be okay or something like that? Or?
So usually the commissions or public bodies I work with, if they're doing a site inspection, will nominate certainly less than a quorum unless they're going to post it, but sometimes one person. If the commission decides as a matter of policy they want more than one person there, you would always want to be under that quorum requirement. Sometimes for practical reasons it makes sense for it to be just one person. If it's 2 for additional feedback, that's fine too. But it's not triggered until you have the quorum.
Okay.
But we can go to a site inspection.
As long as you don't deliberate.
We can, yeah.
Right.
Yep.
It's information gathering.
Information
Right.
gathering, note gathering, and then you come back to the meeting and you say, this is what did you see, what did you see, what did you see, and then it's open to members of the public in an accessible location. Another item to include, and this issue has come up in several communities I've worked with, the optics of closing the door during an open session, and would someone know that they were invited in, or should you leave it open? Or I had one community where the door was just simply inadvertently locked, and so that's something just to be conscious of if you're in a location, perhaps downstairs where there is a door, you might want to keep it ajar or make sure it's open so that people know that they can come into the meeting. Posting requirements. The open meeting law requires that your meeting notice be posted, which I know you guys do, at least 48 hours in advance of the meeting, and that excludes Saturdays, Sundays, and legal holidays unless there's an emergency. So for a Monday meeting, it has to be on Thursday, but if Monday's a holiday, and this is always the most common one, a Tuesday must be also posted on a Thursday. The notice has to state the time and the place that it is posted, and the town clerk's office, I know, usually stamps that. If it's revised, then you would include the original date and the date of the revised posting, just to indicate that both were in compliance. I know that you guys usually post, there's information online and with the town clerk's office as well as other locations. It's simply just to alert members of the public that you can you can have alternative locations for posting. So what needs to be in the content of the meeting notice? The date, time, and place, the listing of topics that the chair reasonably anticipates will be discussed at the meeting. And the topics have to have sufficient specificity to alert the public to what's going to be discussed. So what I always say, if you have a notice of intent for a particular property, you're going to want to put the property address. If you have a particular project's name, you put the project's name. It's enough that if I'm sitting at home and I look on the internet and I say, wow, I really want to go to that hearing on this particular project, it's of interest to me, or I'm close to that property. You know, I think when the open meeting law first was changed a while back now, a lot of agendas simply had new business, old business. There's certainly been a trend, as your meeting notices are, you know, to more specificity, but we want to provide as much detail as we can.
Janelle, what about legal notices? Is that up to the newspaper to give us some sort of format, or is there a standard form that you guys recommend?
We have forms for legal notices. You're saying separate and apart from the open meeting law requirements when you send out notices of a hearing?
Yeah, just how do we post? I mean, we've been doing it for 20 years,
Right.
but
So the
just
statutory...
making sure we're posting the legal notices correctly as well. So
Sure.
it's basically the same as what we have on the agenda.
We can certainly help with that in terms of the open meeting law requirements are going to be different than the separate statutory requirements as to what needs to be in the dates for posting, as you know. But I know you work with Amy a lot, and she can certainly assist you with making sure those notices are up to date.
All right.
So you have to be detailed, but it doesn't have to be a long paragraph for each item. Again, it's just to provide information to the public. But again, old or new business would say if you can steer away from that with more specificity, then that's a good place to start. Other practical considerations that through the years the Attorney General's office has issued guidance on is not to use acronyms, write out terms that may not be familiar to the general public, such as HUD, DHCD, DEP might be another one, to spell those out. And certainly if you're going to have an executive session, you'd want to cite the specific purpose for which you're going into an executive session. So for litigation, that would be purpose 3, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. Avoid shorthand references, you know, not just notice of intent or property matter or Conservation Commission matter. Again, addresses are usually a really good place to start. The name of an applicant for a particular project is a good place to start. That way, if someone wants to come in and ask for additional information, they can come into the office and ask. If an executive session is posted, you always need to have an open session on the agenda and then the executive session as well, because you open the meeting in open session and then you go into executive session. And we'll talk about the mechanics of that a little bit, but you always want to have both on the agenda and not just an executive session. So what happens if there's a situation where something comes up after it's posted, but whether or not it was anticipated or not? So if a matter is truly not anticipated by the chair, it can be discussed and acted upon. And I'm taking out of account emergencies. Emergencies are true emergencies. There's a flood. There's a sewer issue. That the Attorney General's office has said if there's an emergency and the commission needs to act in an expedient way, it certainly can. And what they recommend is then you just have at your next meeting, you have an ongoing discussion when it can be posted 48 hours in advance, and say there was an emergency, we spoke about it on September 23rd, we had this conversation, the commission took these votes, we're putting it on again to advise members of the public as to that emergency action taken. If it's not an emergency, if it's not reasonably anticipated, it can technically be discussed, but the Attorney General's office recommends that unless it requires immediate action, that the best practice is really to put it off till the next meeting. And that's really to make sure that, again, members of the public, and that's the overarching policy, have notice of the matters under discussion.
Once in a while on a Friday, we'll get a request for a certificate of compliance for a closing that's on a Tuesday. If we have a meeting Monday, I'll try to get out and look at it that morning.
Yep.
So we don't have the ability to, or we're not anticipating that to be on the agenda, but we're trying to help people get to their closing. So is that still appropriate?
So that
or-
wouldn't be anticipated,
Yeah.
and we, in the next
'Cause
slide,
we
on
would
the
have
bottom
already
of
posted
10.
on Thursday, and then Friday was, hey, can you help us out by Monday? Otherwise, they have to wait 2 more weeks.
Right, so if it's something that there was no way to foresee,
Yeah.
but you'll see in the second bullet on the bottom of page 10, poor planning does not equal an emergency. So I think the emergency is out, and this happens quite often. But if it's something really not anticipated, it didn't even come to your office until time, then if the commission takes it up, again, you'd want to best practice, put it on for the next meeting, explain the circumstances, and reiterate the conversation the commission had.
So even if it was a certificate of compliance, it's really not the subject of a public hearing, you would still want to add something like that to the next agenda?
I would, yeah.
I mean, they're not voting on it, they're not signing it before the meeting.
Right.
Let's say something came up Friday and I was able to inspect it today, then we would say, well, this came up, the closing is tomorrow, you know, we did the inspection, it looks okay, and then they might vote on it that night and sign it.
Right.
That's still okay, right?
As long as it was unanticipated. Right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
But then, I think we were talking about, should we then put it on the next meeting? And if the board has to take action out within that 48-hour window when it's not posted, because it's not anticipated, then I think
So
best
put
practice
it
is
on
to
the
put it
next
on for
agenda
the
anyway.
next, just to
But
revalidate what
but
happened.
this is not, I mean, that is, a certificate of compliance involves the closeout of a project that has already had public review.
Right, that was
Right.
my
So-
point, that there's no public hearing, it's just an administrative.
Right, but you're voting at that meeting whether to technically close the project out, right?
Well, whether
And
or
sign the
not-
certificate of compliance.
Whether it is in compliance
Correct.
with the original requirements that were laid out in the public process.
Right. So if the commission is considering something within its jurisdiction, I think in an ideal world, what Jennifer asked was, would it be posted on that meeting's agenda to say certificate of compliance, 10 Main Street? Wouldn't it?
If it
If
came
you
in on-
had-
Normally,
have
if
it
it
on
came in
time.
on time, it would be on the agenda,
Right.
yes.
Yeah,
So if it comes in within that 48-hour window in an unanticipated manner,
Right, so it's not on the agenda.
the commission can still run its ordinary course.
Okay.
However, then at the next meeting, it should essentially validate what it did because it.
Okay.
so we just basically read it for the record
Yep.
at the next
Yep.
meeting?
Yep.
That makes sense. So that's what we end up doing with an emergency certificate
Yeah,
or an
yeah.
enforcement order. If it's something that I have to issue right away, then it's on the next agenda, and then we ratify the vote.
Right.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
So, when posting an emergency meeting, consider posting a regular meeting as well to allow the public body to ratify the action taken at the emergency meeting. Recordings, if the meeting is being recorded, then we recommend the chair make a public statement regarding audio or video recording if an attendee intends to record. So that would be if a member of the public intends to record the meeting. So if a member of the public wanted to record the meeting on his or her phone, for instance, they should notify the chair. The chair must make an announcement as to the recording and reasonably regulate the place and operation so it doesn't interfere with the meeting.
Do we need to make an announcement that all meetings are being recorded?
Some public bodies do as a matter of practice, but if it's public television or cable access and it's obvious obvious to members of the meeting that they're being recorded, then that is not
Right. but
Yeah.
We routinely record for accuracy of
the minutes, right? That it's only for members of the public that want to record because of the wiretap requirements. So, public participation, this has been a new a new hot button issue in open meeting law, trending topic, so to speak, in open meeting law areas. And technically, public participation is not required by the open meeting law, and I've cited the determination from the Attorney General's office on that. There are some practical considerations if the commission does want to allow it for a particular meeting or a particular set of meetings. Do you want to hold it at the beginning or the end of the meeting? And then certain controls should be in place to protect individuals' free speech rights, and consider potentially limiting every particular topic to a time frame or a minutes or a couple of minutes. But avoid debate, and certainly everyone should be treated the same, regardless of the content of the individual's comments during the public comment portion.
Are you talking about if somebody just randomly shows up and says, I want to talk about something? That's not during a public hearing for a wetland thing when we finish our discussion and then we open up to the public.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I don't know if your agendas ever include a public comment portion.
We don't, because
Separate and apart
we
from
need
public
everybody
hearings.
to put it on the agenda,
Right.
so it's noticed.
So,
But there is a requirement in the public information gathering process to allow the public to speak.
that's correct. So as part of the public hearing process, but if there were items on your agenda that didn't require a public hearing, it's more in the context, to be honest, of a board of selectmen or other public bodies that don't have adjudicatory hearings like the Conservation Commission does. So taking it out of this, if you have a school committee, sometimes school committees have a 15-minute public comment portion at the beginning of each meeting. And for that, what they'll say is, okay, every individual can have 2 minutes to speak. And so that you and I or everyone else that wants to speak during the public comment portion is treated exactly the same. And we'll talk at the end. There was a recent Superior Court case involving the Natick School Committee, where the school committee, 2 individuals sued the school committee saying it was a violation of their free speech rights, because they weren't allowed to speak the same, because they were critical of school administrators, versus how other individuals who didn't have the same content of their speech were allowed to speak longer. And so the Superior Court recently adjudicated that case, and so there are free speech considerations in play when you don't have a public hearing.
Yeah, I've always envisioned our process as being relatively rigid as stipulated by the wetland.
Right.
We don't have a lot of free-wheeling choice.
Right. And in the adjudicatory hearing process, you're governed by the underlying substantive statute, the Wetlands Protection Act, and so you have those requirements. I think the one takeaway is that technically, while it's strongly favored to have public participation in all areas of public body meetings, it's technically not required by the open meeting law, so that's just something to keep in mind in case that issue ever comes up. Remote participation, do you guys?
It's being discussed now.
Okay,
We're on down.
so we'll skip over that section for now.
Attempting to do remote participation in other meeting venues, I don't recommend it. It is very awkward, it's very difficult.
Everything's really
This means that we can just send in a monitor and
Alexa?
Alexa.
We'll send in Alexa?
So-
Alexa?
give our opinion.
No, they put the phone on the table and then, they would announce a certain number of people are remote, but then trying to participate becomes very difficult.
So I just wanted to go over a little bit the executive session process. I know that's an issue that comes up from time to time, so just something to keep in mind. The process, as I mentioned before, is the commission would first convene in an open session, and you would post on the agenda the open session and the executive session. If you ever need assistance with the language for a particular posting, you could certainly let us know, and we'd be happy to help with that. And then you state the purposes for the executive session for, anything that can be revealed without revealing too much. It's always a little bit of a balancing test. I've had cases over the years that deal with, potential significant enforcement activity, and maybe that's a situation where, for strategic reasons, you can't disclose a particular location. But if it's current litigation, what we always recommend is you include the name of the case. You also include the property address. That's something, if you have a DEP appeal, you would include the DEP appeal number. Again, just to alert members of the public so they know the valid basis for which the commission's entering into an executive session. So the process is you take and record a roll call vote to go into an executive session and announce if the open session will reconvene afterwards or not. You maintain exhibits and documents used to prepare the minutes just as you would with your open session meeting minutes. Only discuss the matters cited, and all votes in executive session must be done by roll call. I've included some of the common purposes here. I think that perhaps 3 and 6 would be the two that would be most used by the Conservation Commission. I'm happy, we do have a card with all the executive session process and all of the purposes to go into it. I'm happy to provide a copy to Jennifer by email. I was trying to save some trees, but I do have a PDF version of that I'm happy to forward along as well if you guys would like.
Yes, thank you.
If an executive session is anticipated, so perhaps it will be or perhaps it won't be, and you may not know until the day before, there's litigation that may settle, you may get a decision from DEP, there may be something on there. I always recommend you put it on the agenda. There's no harm in doing that. You put the open session on, you put the executive session on, and then if you don't need it, you can ultimately not convene an executive session, but that way it's on there as well.
You have to actually take a vote not to do it?
No, you would just say, the chair would say, and at that point, the purpose of the executive session is no longer needed this afternoon or tonight, therefore we're not going to meet an executive session at this time.
Okay.
And that's then recorded in the open session meeting minutes. Because often when I am handling open meeting law complaints, I get requests for certain meetings that the commission or the board never met in executive session, but it's on the agenda. And so you want to just clarify that for the open session meeting minutes so that if someone says, well, I know that the board went in or the commission went into an executive session, you can say, actually, we didn't. Here are our meeting minutes. They clearly say that we didn't end up going in that evening. And that can come up a lot if you're doing enforcement litigation, or you're just waiting for a decision, or you think a case might settle. It helps just to have it on. If it gets moved, it can get moved to the next meeting. We talked a little bit about including it on the meeting minute and including all information you can in your vote to go into executive session without compromising the commission's position. So let's talk a little bit about meeting minutes. This is best practices for meeting minutes under the open meeting law. Like I said, for the agenda, the meeting minutes likewise must have the date, the time, the place of the meeting, the members present or absent, a detailed summary of discussion of each topic sufficient to allow a person not present at the meeting to understand what transpired. So if a resident picked up the meeting minutes, would they understand this is what was discussed by the commission, these are the votes that were taken, this was the resolution, these are the documents that ultimately were considered. A list of documents and other exhibits used by the body at the meeting, which will be part of the record, but not the minutes. So what does used mean? And this is a determination from the Attorney General's office. And just so the commission knows, the Attorney General's office has a separate division now called the Division of Open Government that oversees open meeting law compliance, both on a proactive basis. They do training, and they also review complaints past the local or administrative level up to their office for further appeals. So it's used if a document is physically present at the meeting, if a document is verbally identified, and if the content of a document is discussed by the members. That's going to be most of the documents that you use during your meeting. Certainly anything introduced during a hearing is going to be used, so that would be referenced in the meeting minutes as well. Meeting minutes must be created and approved in a timely manner. The new regulations from 2017, that must occur within the next three meetings or within 30 days, whichever is later. It's a pretty short time period. I know you guys are very good about doing that, but certainly if there's holidays or summers, it can be difficult if there's quorum issues, so that's the guidance that comes from the Attorney General's office on that issue. The one wrinkle in this is that there is an intersection with the public records law in that meetings are a public record even if they're not approved. So if you get a request for draft meeting minutes, those are public records, even if they haven't ultimately been approved by the commission. Their draft form is still subject to disclosure under the open meeting law and public records law, unless it's subject to certain exemptions, if there's executive session materials, for instance. And those must be available within 10 days, and you cannot charge under the open meeting law and public records law. You can't charge for meeting minutes, which is different than other types of public records requests where you can send a good faith estimate. For meeting minutes, you cannot charge.
So to approve the minutes, we need to have a quorum of the commission or a quorum of the people who were at the meeting?
The commission.
Quorum of the commission. So even if somebody wasn't at that meeting, but they're there that night, they can approve the minutes.
You can vote to accept those minutes? Okay.
On the executive session side, it's of course slightly different. The executive session minutes can be withheld until the purpose of the exemption has been met, unless there's information in the minutes that is then otherwise protected under the public records law. So essentially what that means is if you have litigation and you have executive session minutes to talk about the litigation, but the litigation is settled or the appeal is over, those meeting minutes, the commission may review them, which they're required to do on a routine basis, and say, we have no problem with releasing those, but those minutes may have attorney-client privileged information in them. They might be subject to release because the litigation is over and there's no lasting policy implications for releasing them. However, you can still redact the privileged information out of those minutes before you produce them to a requester. So they may be subject to release because the executive session has expired, but you may look at the public records law and say, okay, there's another reason why these can be withheld.
So who decides what to redact? Does
The
it have to
commission
be-
does.
The commission has
On a
take a vote?
privilege, so how it usually happens if a request comes in for a particular set of minutes or several sets on a particular project, usually is the case. Upon receipt of that request, the commission is required to look at the minutes and say, at this time, can these minutes be released? If the answer is no, the executive session purpose has not expired for those minutes. The litigation is still open is one reason. The commission would deliberate about that in executive session and say, we reviewed it on September 23rd. It is our opinion that the minutes cannot be released at this time. That is the response back to the requester. If the the appeal is over, the litigation's over, and the commission meets and says, no, the litigation's over, no problem, we're fine with releasing them, there's no lasting implication, it wouldn't hurt the town's position. However, there is privileged information or privileged communications which could impact other projects, or it's confidential legal advice.
Okay.
So you would work with town council's office to figure out whether the redactions need to be made, and then we would release portions and withhold other portions.
So we wouldn't do that without the advice of counsel?
Correct, yep.
Okay.
Because
But
you
if
also
you only
have to
have 10
you
days
also have to
to-
do a privilege log.
Oh.
And within 10 days?
But you have to do it
You
within
have to
10
ag-
days, but we only meet every 14, so then we have to call a special
You have to
meeting?
acknowledge the request within the first 10 days. So you'll say, dear John Smith, we've received your request for executive session minutes for August 2019. Please be advised that the commission will meet on October 10th to consider your request, and will issue a further letter after that point. And then you can certainly work with counsel if there's a question on that.
So once you make that first initial contact within 10 days, you don't have a deadline after that, so actually.
I think it's within 30 days or 2 meetings, or
Right.
it can be extended by agreement of the parties, but you do need to get that first, the first letter out within 10 days. Oh, yeah, must provide a response to a request within 10 calendar days. And it often is the case, if you get a public records request, you're getting some for minutes and you're getting some for other documents. The public records law allows you to send an estimate if it's a huge request, or for any request for the portion that isn't the minutes. It's just the minutes you can't charge for. There's overlap.
And the estimates, we've been literally counting every page that somebody asked for, and sometimes it's taken 4 hours just to go through the application and count all of the pages and figure out how much money it'll cost. That's what people end up doing.
So under the public records law, you can charge for the search time to pull all the documents and locate them. It's capped at $25 an hour. And then the public records law is now favoring the electronic production of documents. Obviously, for oversized plans, you can't do that. You're allowed to charge the actual cost of those oversized plans if they have to be sent out, or if it's more expensive to print them. Other than that, it's 5 cents per page, whether it's single-sided or double-sided. So
Sometimes we send out the estimate and then we don't hear back from anyone, and we just wasted 4 hours of Melissa's and my time to come up with the estimate, and then they decide, no, we don't want it anymore.
So once you send, I certainly understand, it's especially large requests are very time consuming. There are determinations that say once you send the estimate out, nothing further is required until the requester pays, as you know.
Yep.
But certainly it can be very time consuming to even be able to figure out that good faith estimate.
Okay, but that's what other commissions do?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Or it depends if there's
Have to spend
electronic
4 hours
records.
when she's only here for 18.
There are certain, I wouldn't say best practices, but certain practices that I'm happy to chat with you about.
Okay.
That I use in other communities that can maybe shorten a little bit of the time to get to that estimate.
Okay.
I'm happy to chat with you about that. So, in the event there is a complaint regarding anything that transpired by the commission, there's 3 steps essentially involved. The first is that the complainant files a written complaint with the public body, and then within 14 business days of receipt, the public body essentially responds to the complaint, notifying the complainant and the Attorney General's office. After that point, if the complainant is unsatisfied, he or she can seek a further review by the Attorney General's office. The Attorney General's office reviews the allegations, reviews the public body's response, and makes a determination after their further review. Sometimes they ask for additional information as part of that process, and I often work with communities on that as well. The process for responding to an open meeting law complaint is it has to be done at a properly posted meeting. It can be done in executive or open session. And we talked a little bit about the cure process, but that's if there's something that may have not been a best practice. There's an ability to cure that violation. The next slide is really just to give an overview in terms of the potential violations that are at issue, and that the Attorney General's office can file an action in Superior Court to determine if there's been non-compliance. The revised regulations now from a couple of years ago, there were some recent changes. Posting notices in or near Town Hall still requires all notices to be filed with the clerk's office and posted with the date and time recorded. The website can serve as the quote-unquote all hours location, but the choice, and I know you guys do use the website, is made by the Chief Executive Officer. This is the one wrinkle that I've had come up in several communities since the regulations were changed. If the town's website is down within the 48-hour period, the period for posting, and it's not restored within 6 hours that it was discovered to be crashed or down, then rescheduling is required of that meeting. And I have had that come up during power outages, in particular during the winter months. So I'm just flagging it because it has come up from time to time, and the open meeting law, the revised regulations from 2016 specifically address that point. So just to flag it for you.
So who determines discovery?
If there's a server down, I had one community, the T1 line went down, so the website went down. It doesn't require, anyone to click on the website to make sure, but if you are alerted to the fact that the website's down, the Attorney General's office says it has to be restored from 6 hours within the discovery or rescheduling is required.
Does that outage have to be documented?
Yes. It has to come to your attention. There's no requirement that the website be checked 24 hours a day. So certifications, in addition to new members receiving open meeting law regulations and the Attorney General's office's open meeting law guide, it requires all new public body members to receive any determinations issued by the Attorney General's office that there was a violation. So that's for new members of the commission. The intent of that was to reduce repeat offenders and avoid intentional violations when a public body has new members. Filing a complaint, there was new guidance that says it has to be on the Attorney General's form. There's a form available, and it can't be on someone's own letterhead, for instance. If the Attorney General's office, after reviewing a particular matter, orders compliance with their determination, the public body generally has 30 days and then must notify the Attorney General's office as to the action that it's taken. Remote participation, we don't have to go into that in detail now because I know the town's considering it, but just so that you are aware of the remote participation requirements. And then we talked about the approval process a little bit earlier, that it has to be within the next 3 meetings or 30 days, whichever is later. There is a provision that allows you to have a later time period to approve for good cause. That is really if there's an issue with having a quorum, there's vacancies in the commission. There are individuals that haven't been able to attend for a variety of personal or family reasons. That would be good cause. Scheduling conflicts, a significant amount of hearings, heavy business. It needs to be more than, I need more time. So I just want to close it out, and I appreciate all your time here. I know this is a lot of information, but feel free to reach out afterwards if anyone has any specific questions. Just some recent notable court decisions. I mentioned the Natick School Committee case that deals with the public comment or open forum matter. And it basically says that if public speech is going to be restricted, that it has to be narrowly tailored to address the public body's interest. Town of Swansea case versus the Attorney General. That was a case that our office handled. The Superior Court determined that the Attorney General's office had acted arbitrarily by applying subjective criteria to determine whether a meeting notice was sufficiently detailed. And so that was a decision that was in favor of the town. And Bolter, I don't think is something that the commission would deal specifically with, but it talked about employee evaluation by public bodies and circulation of employee evaluations containing opinions of the board member. before the meeting violated the open meeting law. And so if that's an issue that any members of the commission want to review, there's updated guidance put out by the state on that issue as well. And I appreciate all of your time.
Hey, thank you.
Thanks, Jill.
You guys are doing a
Thank
great
you,
job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice meeting you all.
Same here. I'm sure Jennifer will have a little follow-up list at some point.
Oh, it's fine. What do we have?
Bye, Jennifer. Bye, everyone. Nice seeing you.
Thank you.
May I just ask a quick
course.
question? Since you bring up the matter of saving trees, does the state have some kind of mechanism for regulating how much, or at least suggesting how much paper is used in used in meetings or in any public matters on which the state might have an interest?
Not that I'm aware of. I know this, for purposes of the open meeting law, I know the goal of the state in this context is to ensure that members of public body receive training materials and resources. On the public record side, when the law changed a couple of years ago, there was a movement to produce records only in electronic form. So it used to be, under the public records law, you could charge, I think it was 25 cents a page to produce documents in response to a public records request, and that was decreased to 5 cents a page. But it is strongly favored to only produce documents in electronic form. I would also note that the Public Records Division, which is under the Secretary of State's office, they have also issued guidance that if a public body or a community has a particular interest in a particular topic, they recommend, or their best practice is to put all those documents on the town's website to make them available electronically to members of the community and other stakeholders. And so I think that the tide is turning a little bit in terms of having more documents available electronically to save some of the copying. And I know that's been a trend in the public records context. And I know that when we're involved in responding, in particular to large public records responses, they're usually produced now on thumb drives or DVDs or materials on that, and hard copies are very rarely produced. So hopefully that'll save some of the trees.
Well, maybe we can start with the number of copies that we require.
You can look at that again.
Yeah.
That could be a start.
But
How many copies of applications we require?
I know one best practice is for a large project you have in a community, and I know you guys do this. You add everything as a PDF to the town's website, or anything that members of the public might be really interested in just goes up online so that people don't come in and need a copy of that. Some communities put everything online. But I think there's a movement in the open meeting law and the public records context to have as much done electronically as possible. So, yep. But
I understand that documents have to be a certain size for the ADA. So on the other hand, I have notes for the upcoming meeting, and they all fit on 4 pages. That's only because I made the mistake of not fitting them on 3.
Okay.
Anyway,
Yeah.
this is tonight's packet.
yes, I did double-sided,
Yes.
and I did multiple slides per page.
Yes.
So now you have a resource material, but I will circulate that card as well to Jennifer, and she can send it out. Thank you for your time. Thank you. Bye.
Good night.
Have a good night.
You too. Do you want to quickly pick a date for that, just so it doesn't get lost?
For the Thursday night meeting.
Yeah.
So we would do not have a Monday night meeting in that case, or?
No, it's just a couple of people want to go do a site inspection.
What day would that
Thursday?
Oh, what?
Well, actually, it's you guys, so it could be any day you
I
want.
could do the 3rd or the
Oh.
10th.
Because he can't come
He has to be there,
It's a
right?
school meeting. I'm sorry?
Does he have to be there?
Does he have to be
Yeah.
there? Yeah.
So.
He can't do Monday or Wednesday,
Wednesday.
'cause he's working, so I suggested Thursday, he said Thursdays were fine, so,
Did you post that?
no. It's fact finding.
Oh, okay.
That's right, it's only a couple people need to go, right?
What time Thursday? Oh, what?
It's up to you guys, it's not, I'm not
Oh,
going.
okay. All right.
It's your inspection.
Oh, it's a field, a site inspection?
do this Thursday.
Your enforcement order.
Oh, so it's an inspection though, site
Yeah,
inspection.
it's an inspection.
Okay.
Can we do it after 2:30, on whatever day?
Yeah, it's fine. So what day is the 3rd? You mean the 3rd and the 3rd? Can you do the 3rd?
2:30 is okay.
On the 3rd? 3rd is 2:30, Lisa?
I would have to check my calendar, but I'd just go ahead and do it anyway. I should be able to. but-
So we have a plan for the 3rd of October at 2:30.
10:30, the 3rd at 2:30.
Yep.
Do you have a backup date, just so I can give him in case he can't do that?
10th and it's be Thursday?
Yep.
Yeah, I can't do the 10th, but you just still, I would still do it.
So we'll do the 3rd and then the 10th is back.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Three minutes.
Question. Jen, is your office report, is that a public document, or is it subject to the public documents ADA thing?
Do you think someone's requesting my office report?
Probably not. So,
Are you trying to give it to somebody?
no, my,
Because no one will be able to read it. It's all in abbreviations and acronyms.
in that case, might you reduce it to front and back one page? It's a small matter, but.
Font 6. Get more lines on it.
Michael, feel free.
It helps. Sorry.
I don't know what to say about that. Either you want to know what I'm doing in the last 2 weeks or you don't. So if you don't want it, then I can not print it and give it to you. But I'm not spending more time writing my office report than doing my work. So
You would rather have it reduced to one copy
Keep going.
and pass it around.
My advice.
I don't.
Keep trucking. Keep on trucking.
I don't know. Okay, all right. It's probably not the dumbest thing.
No, it's. I mean it. Whatever.
Just email it.
Just retract that. Retract that.
Just waiting.
Oh, because we said it would be.
Yeah, we
yeah,
set aside, so we have to
Yeah.
violate,
2 minutes.
We get through it. Lesson last year.
What about your MACC guidebook? You wanted to
Schedule a date for
start
that, right?
coming up with,
Yeah.
we're gonna do section by section to go over that guidebook that you got on a Thursday. Do you have a time you want to start?
So that we would do that on Thursday.
Yeah.
Like once a month. Seventeen.
October 17th?
Does that work for you guys?
I can barely hear you.
17th
October 17th?
at like, not sure, 6:30. We're gonna do it for like an hour, right?
Yeah, an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
Jen, can you
7:30 and I'm ready to leave
That's what
at
I'm
8.
thinking,
Can you
yeah.
just email us that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
So we're gonna be getting emails out.
yeah. And it'll be posted, it's open, but it'll be
Okay.
just going over the buffer zone guidebook and how you might want to look at projects.
Okay. You ready to go to the next one?
Yep.
All right, being 7:45 PM, we have a wetland hearing for a request for determination of applicability, file DET 1087, CIL Realty of Mass Incorporated, 183 John Scott Boulevard. Proposed project involves plans to repair an existing septic system within 100 feet of wetlands.
In accordance with the Massachusetts Wetland Protection Act, Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40 as amended, the Norton Conservation Commission will hold a request for a determination of applicability hearing for Michael Trowbridge of 183 John Scott Boulevard, Norton, Mass. Proposed project involves plans to repair an existing septic system within 100 foot of border vegetated land.
They paid the bill.
Stay within line, it's just real.
All right. It's important, you know.
Thank you.
For the record, Michael Sherwood, Hutch and Sherwood Associates, at your last meeting, you signed an order allowing us to repair the septic system was failed. It's a group home. During that time, it has been inspected, it has been installed, and they actually sodded the front yard. And everything really has been complete as far as the determination. I've got a series of pictures if you want to go through those and pass those around, which show the front yard. I believe Jennifer has gone out there and seen the final product.
Yes.
Like magic.
Yeah.
So is this an as-built? Or is this still proposed?
No, that's still the proposed.
Okay.
Yeah.
The as-built has already been submitted to the town, and they actually did approve it.
Okay. By town, you mean Board of Health?
Board of Health, yes.
Yeah, not us. Okay. Pass that along. Old permit still needs to be addressed.
I had sent an email just wondering, I never heard back from you regarding the old permit. The old
You guys are working
conditions,
together,
yes.
right?
Yes. The old permit was for the visual barrier and plantings, correct?
Right, the old permit still needs to be closed out. That was an order of conditions. Same owner. Received a letter in 2004 that said we need as-built plans. It looked like the no disturbance zone was altered without approval and not in accordance with the permit. So still need as-built plans on the old permit, and wetland boundary was cleared.
Okay, I wasn't
Yeah, it
aware
was-
that you needed an as-built on the, I knew there was an approach.
You got this letter though?
Yeah, that was from 2004.
Right, but you got this letter that said you need
Yes,
the
yes.
as-built plan. So,
Yeah.
same thing. Still need the as-built plan.
Okay, but we need to work together though, that's why when I emailed you,
Today.
I emailed you last week, that's why I'm trying to have a conversation,
Yep.
so we're not doing that tonight.
Yep.
So the visual
So you
barrier
staked
markings have
two
been
areas.
staked for you to see where it is. I
Yep.
left you a message last week.
Yep, but it goes, you marked one side, it goes all the way around the property. Did you mark
I marked the
all the way
flags that
around?
you asked me to mark, yes, on the side of the house that I'm working. I didn't do the back of the house.
But the visual barrier on the original plans is the whole property,
Okay?
not just to one side.
Okay.
So you'll mark that.
I did not mark that, but I'll do it tomorrow.
Is there a way of getting a copy of that original plan that shows the visual barrier? 'Cause I don't have that.
Yeah, you can,
Okay.
anytime to the office and
Okay.
get a copy of it.
So as far as the plantings, you said your board's going to decide what they want to replace back there, and we will forward that to
Right.
the original applicant?
Yep, the old permit had the visual barrier, the 25-foot no disturbance zone and the visual barrier requirement. Instead, it was cleared all the way up to the wetland boundary. So you're gonna stake
Right.
the 25-foot all the way around and then commission would make a decision on whether they want that full 25-foot restored, or if you're going to accept a smaller, no disturbance zone from the original approved project.
I just need to report back to the property owner to let them know what they need to do. We're just a second-hand construction
You
company.
guys wanna weigh in?
Yep.
Do you guys want to restore the 25-foot buffer, or do you want to allow them to have a smaller no disturbance zone since they're...
Well, if a barrier is put up, will it regrow over time fairly rapidly?
It should grow back in, yeah.
Yeah, there's vegetation all around, so
Yeah.
if we just prevent
Yeah.
continued clearing, then
Let's just have that visual.
vegetation, so that seems like
You guys okay with that?
For once, I think Julian and I are in agreement.
Gene?
There must have been one other.
There must have been one other time.
Lisa?
Yeah, I mean, it's been 15 years, right?
So let it ride. Julian, any questions, comments from anyone else? So we've already approved the emergency.
Well, you approved
So-
the emergency certificate to allow the septic repair to be
Right.
done. Yes.
So we need a motion to approve what we just talked about, or?
You have to decide if you're gonna require, like what we normally do, the old permit to be closed out before you issue the new permit. That's all.
But wouldn't we need the as-built from this one first to close out the old one?
That's what you typically do.
Yeah.
Well, can a condition be put in this permit that requires information to close out the prior permit to be submitted?
Well, this is a determination of
Yeah.
applicability. It's not a notice of
Yeah.
intent, so there are no conditions with it.
I mean, I assume we'd close both at once we get the as-built.
we would be able to close it.
Once you get the as-built and the
Yeah.
no disturbance area
What you're suggesting
corrected.
is a continuation.
It may be appropriate, so I can look at the stakes that he's gonna put out tomorrow. Once we have the area staked, then I can take the picture to show you what's actually out there.
So are you amenable to a continuation?
Yeah.
And that way, potentially an as-built can be submitted, we will be able to close out both.
The notice of result was staked out by then, the pictures will be taken, and it makes sense how it looks now. So you
Right.
guys,
Come in and look at the file, though. I'm
Yeah, I gotta get a copy.
so October 7th,
not gonna do that for you.
the next meeting, does that work for you guys?
I'll take it out for a while, it's not much left. Sure.
Oh, wait.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to continue DET 1087 to the meeting on the October 7th.
Second.
Dan Pearson makes a motion to continue the public hearing for file DET 1087 to the October 7th meeting, seconded by Julian. All those in favor? Aye.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm not sure. You have some of the, you have some of the, go ahead. Water's probably cold. All right, now being 7:53 approximately. We have a meeting for notice of intent, file number 250-1048. I'll start with the legal notice. It's for Frank Fournier, Town of Thornton, Pine Street, in accordance with the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act, Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40 as amended. The Norton Conservation Commission will hold a notice of intent hearing for Frank Fournier, 166 Southcott Boulevard, P.O. Box 1168, North Mass. The proposed project involves plans to install a water main along Pine Street within 100 foot of wetlands. And we have a bill for a legal notice, is that still?
Thank you. And green cards? Yep. Thanks.
All right, please identify yourself and nice presentation.
My name is Karen McManus. I'm with Weston and Sampson Engineers on behalf of the Water Department for Rome. And here for the Pine Street construction. The Water Department's proposing to install 6,100 of 12-inch ductile iron pipe to replace existing unlined cast iron water mains along Pine Street from Plain Street down to well number 1. So this is pretty much the environmental receptors map that's in the submittal. You can't really see the roadway itself with all the other colors overlaid, but pretty much we've outlined in red here the length of the project, 6,100 feet here is Pine Street here. And then well number 1 is actually unpaved. All of Pine Street is paved, but going into well number 1, we actually have an unpaved area. It's already previously disturbed, so we're all within the previously disturbed working area for this project. We've installed, as you can see on the different plan sheets that we've attached, also 12-inch scroll and wattles throughout the resource areas along the sides of the road. Our intent would be to excavate the water main, roughly trenches that are approximately 5 feet wide by 6 feet deep. And then immediately after the single pipe is installed, it would be backfilled and compacted. And then at the end of each week, our intent would be to pave the middle of each week after that's all settled. And then pretty much at the end of the project area, after we have at least one winter, the town will be coming back in to pave curb to curb to overlay the roadway again. We have catch basin protection installed for any areas that there are. There aren't really any catch basins for the most part on this project. And then we do anticipate that there will be some groundwater encountered. During those periods of time, we will be watering through a water catchment area. There's a detail on the back of the plans on T1. And discharge will be identified there, hopefully to naturally go back into the ground, as well as capturing all of any sediment or any disturbed area that might be coming up through that dewatering setup. And then as far as any of the culvert crossings, we do have a couple pipes that we will be crossing. For the most part, we're going to be going under these pipes, except that the perennial stream located down by well number 1 is pretty deep, so we're actually going to go over that one. Pretty much we're hoping to get about 100 feet a day, maybe more, depending on the contractor's progress. After we receive the order of conditions, we intend to go out to bid for public bidding for this project, at which time we'll receive information from the contractor and have a little bit more understanding on timing and schedule. The hope is, though, to bid this winter and potentially start some work in November, December, and then can come back in the springtime and do work from spring through summertime when we have a little bit lower groundwater table. Starting preferably up by Plain Street and then working our way down to 12. At this time, I'll open up for any questions from the commission.
So the water line is going under the culvert?
There's a few RCP pipes along the route, 12-inch diameter. So we intend to be going underneath all of those except for the one down here, which we have to indicate on the plans to go over.
And there's no concern about the weight of the culvert being on the water line?
It's just a pipe itself. There's not really any concern about it. The culvert
We've just
is
heard that
it's a
concern
pipe.
in other projects, just want to clarify that for
So
everybody.
the water main itself is one thing, an actual box culvert. We're not crossing any box culverts. These are all existing 12-inch or 32-inch or 36-inch pipelines that are either RCP or metal, corrugated metal. So they're existing pipelines. The highway department has indicated that they've been recently maintained and we're in good standing order.
The natural heritage area?
Yep. So pretty much in this area right here, we did get a call from NISA. We have not received our official letter from them yet. Once we indicated that we were in previously disturbed areas, staying within that, and there was no change in elevation or existing conditions, everything will be returned to their natural or original paved areas. They didn't have any major concerns, but we are still waiting for the original map.
I'm sorry, could you point to that again?
The yellow area here?
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah, so this is the access road to the existing well. And you can actually see it's all, if you zoom into the plans that we supplied to you, but it's actually a gravel roadway leading back there. The whole area has been cleared out, so we're just going exactly parallel to the existing main, a couple feet off.
And what did you say the type of sediment control was?
We have the 12-inch wattles going along the sides of the roadway, as well as if there are any catch basins, we will be installing more or less silt sacks, which is a proprietary name for the installation inside the catch basins themselves.
All right, the staging and stockpile areas?
So we don't anticipate much staging as far as within the resource areas. We do require contractors to remove that from at least 100 feet outside, so they will not be within the buffer zone at all. But we do have occasionally, what we'll probably do, it's a narrow roadway. The contractor will probably pull in a truck side by side, load that truck with the spoils from the trench, and then backfill it with that. We don't anticipate having the dirt actually on the roadway, only because we do want to maintain traffic in this area. So it'll be one lane of traffic open at all times.
And the pipe stockpiled on the side of the road, or no?
Potentially, yeah. There's a few areas where there's a little bit more along the residential area, but within the resource areas, there's really not any room, so we don't really anticipate doing that.
And how will the contractor know he's within the floodplain or riverfront area?
So what we were going to do, we have all of our flagging out there. If it's stayed up through the winter, we can reflag it and before we start construction. But we will have an inspector out on site on a daily basis to monitor everything and make sure that things are in accordance with the notice of intent or conditions as well as our contract documents.
And is there any line flushing that happens?
There is. Typically, with a new water main, we do have to pressurize it and chlorinate. We will be dechlorinating the water whenever we need to go through different segments. And the same situation where we would be flushing would go to the same, either into the dewatering basin or usually what we would do on the end of the pipeline, we put a burlap sack and silt sack and collect them as much as we can. But typically, it's just more for dechlorination at that point and minimization of erosion, which is obviously the whole point of this screening, so we don't anticipate any erosion.
Yes. Yep. Okay. Normally, with like hydrant flushing, it just sort of runs down the road, and then it's picking up all the sediment along the road and then gouging a new area. So you have a plan in place for monitoring that and making sure it's not going to happen when you with the line flushing.
Yeah, I mean, typically what we want to do is on a daily basis check before and after construction starts, make sure the areas are well protected and ready for receiving any kind of flushing when we flush the mains. That hopefully only occurs one time, and it's just the actual volume of the pipe for the duration, usually every 500 feet or so to 1,000 feet. But it's all based on where our hydrants are located too.
So Jennifer, if there's going to be an inspector on site, making sure they're in compliance, then we're just going to have some conditions in there specific to that activity. Want me to keep going?
Yeah.
Okay. So most of your straw wattles or all of your straw wattles are on the shoulder in unpaved areas?
Just right off the edge of the road, yeah.
Okay.
The hope is to get as close to the edge of the road as possible.
So I noticed you have a dewatering detail, but if you put any notes on the plans or the detail as to where that's going to be located?
It would depend on where we actually hit any groundwater. If we do encounter, we do anticipate hitting some down closer to the lower elevation areas. Up in this area, we hope that during the time of construction we won't be hitting any, but they would need to be designated prior. The contractor is required to submit a formal submittal to us for review for location and for the actual materials that they're using, so we can review that with Jennifer in the field just to make sure that the locations are adequate.
So, but if you're doing it as needed and as you go, you might not know where you need it.
So right, so the stretch of the pipe, they would just more or less typically use, another 100 feet or so of temporary hosing to bring it to that location. If we set up a designated location, if there's a way we want to set up one in somebody's, side property over here, that would be it. The town pretty much owns the roadway, so we try to keep it.
So the contractor is going to provide you with a dewatering plan then? Mm-hmm. So we should make that part of our deliverable. You mentioned catch basin inlet protection. Did you provide a detail for that?
There's a small detail on D1. It just basically shows kind of a sedimentation fabric. Our specifications call specifically out the silt sack, which has little handles on the corners.
Oh, I must have missed it. Okay.
It's very tiny. We jammed everything on one place, but
okay.
In a second.
As long as it's there. And then, do you have any provisions for street sweeping?
Yes, so the contractor would require you just keep dust down. We obviously will not be using any calcium chloride in this area, so it'd just be water spray down. But they would be coming through as needed with either hand sweepers or with an actual street sweeper, more mechanical hand sticking and everything up. The hope is also, every Friday that they would be paving, so the first few days. If there is rain or an event, we would normally be right on top of them, making sure that they follow the requirements of the contract documents.
So you have, the crossings that Jennifer was alluding to, you're crossing drain lines, obviously, that's fine, you can have separation. But so is there an open water body down there, an open crossing?
It's all paved, it's actually a.
Well, looks like there's a river.
Is it perennial stream right here?
Just north of that.
This one up here?
Yeah, that one.
Sheet.
Is that an open waterway?
No, it's all underground. Through,
Oh, okay. Oh, it's, okay, so there's one intermittent stream. What sheet is that? C2?
C2, yeah.
Oh, you don't have stationing on here. Do you typically do stationing?
Not for water.
Not for water, okay.
If there was manholes for sewer.
Okay, here we are, yep.
So right here, it's actually buried.
Okay, so it's full depth of aerial, okay.
And then the other. The next page, also underneath the roadway.
All right. Oh, one last question. So is the inspector going to be there from specific to looking at the adherence to the conditions? Or just when they're in areas where there are wetlands, or are they going to be there day in and day out?
They're there full-time during the course of the construction period. So from the start of construction in the morning, first day, through the end of construction, last day.
Okay. And did they give us a SWIP at all? Did you do a SWIP for this project?
We did the stormwater checklist, but I believe.
I don't remember seeing them.
You don't think they did one? Oh.
It's over an acre of alteration.
Oh, yeah, sorry. You're talking about the
Oh.
filing or?
The EPA construction general permit for over an acre of disturbance?
No, it's less than that.
Okay.
Any other questions from commission members? Any questions from members of the audience? Is this an explanation?
Yeah, you have to wait until you get the letter from Natural Heritage.
Okay. Did you inspect this one, Jennifer? Did you walk this one?
I drove by.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So make a motion to continue the public hearing for file number 250-1048 to the October 7th meeting.
To the 7th, is that going to be acceptable?
Sure.
October 7th?
Well, that's our next meeting.
Well, that's over the years.
All right, so a motion made by Lisa, seconded by Pearson. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item is a notice of intent for Charles 148 North Washington Street for a proposed plan for construction of ground pool. Good night. And do we have a legal notice?
Certificate of mailing.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Oh, you're welcome.
All right. So the concerns Charles Cohen, 4th, 148 North Washington Street, map 4, parcel 186. In accordance with Massachusetts Wetland Protection Act, General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40 is amended. The North Conservation Commission will hold a notice of intent hearing for Charles Cohen, 4th, of 148 North Washington Street, Mass. The proposed project is to construct an in-ground pool within 100 foot of the bordering vegetated wetland.
Thank you. Glenn Kowalski from EDT
environmental consultants, and Mr. Charles Conant, before, for an in-ground pool. You have the plan, I know your agent has looked at the site of the today. And we have a delineation, the BBW data forms that went along, we issued the file number, I know on the agenda it doesn't show that we have the file number. You were requested a site inspection, we didn't get it, we were hoping to answer any questions that your agent might have, or at least hear what the questions are. But here we are, in front of you. And we know that you have the policy with the 25-foot zones. There is a brush pile, two of them shown on the plan. One of them encroaches into the wetland. That some of that brush came in, and you have the property, and you don't mind, I can go through the chain and ask them to find, or tell them how long you own the property. They don't mind, and some of the brush came in, was older brush.
Yes, yeah, the
There was
pile
some-
was there when we moved in.
And if he's been hand removing the brush pile, even though I wrote up in the order, if you didn't really notice, we kept on the description that we probably use the track machine to fulfill the rest of it all. But he's removing approximately
At least half, or more than half.
by hand. And the other brush pile showing up that just encroaches in, apparently 2 to 3 years ago, there was a storm that broke off pine limbs. This is actually from the neighbor's property. The pine that was there came in this way.
Several pines came crashing down. The neighbor actually got out and cut everything up, left it there.
It is a shed that we want to remove. It's rotted, it wasn't, it's rotting from the bottom up.
Yeah.
It was just made out of standing pine, so it's rotting out. There had been a pool there is a pool, a defunct pool on the property, but the client chooses to, or is asking to, this is outside the jurisdiction, fill that pool, then crush it up so it will still infiltrate, or will infiltrate, and have a patio. You might be familiar, Rim did the plan, I just want to say that, thank you, Greg. But he didn't want to be involved so much with the notice of intent process as much, he said these days, and I ended up getting involved with all types of projects, from Falmouth to Burlington. And we've done a few of these pools just recently, the last couple of months, Medway, Quorum, different packs and things. So we came here just to file that in the why. We do know that we read your policy, we understand that you want biodegradable, no poly in it. So Rim did put in the detail for 9-inch. Very quite flat back in this area. General yard. There is a tree line showing. The pool, let me say about the wetlands just briefly. The old rail line went in this area, and according to Mr. Conant, probably know more, you've been around town obviously for years, and I'm from Oxford, so I don't know. But the sandy material, it appears, this is raised, and some of these pockets that we have along the rail line, here is, they took the sands out to make the uplift, or bring up the rail line, and that's why we have numbers of pools along this area. I did actually go down the line to find the original discharge running in a, running in a western direction. It is clogged, so that's no longer connected to downstream, but I didn't want to get into the point that some of the pools were deep enough that they could qualify as pond, 10,000 square feet, never drying up. So then everything would be connected to a pond, so that it would be portable. So there was no need to go any further as far as this being isolated, or this being bordering the wetland pockets I saw down there, the depth of them, it would lend me to think that I would have a pond, and then I would have water. It's pretty a steep slope because this had been excavated out, apparently. And so not at the very toe of the slope, but going down the slope. Obviously, we looked at soil vegetation hydrology, as we always do, and that's how I placed that line. We're showing to be 81 feet with the pool, 81 and a half feet, plus or minus with the scale ruler, to the actual pool. And something shorter, as it shows here, 70 feet to the erosion control line. Excess material I wrote up in the project description would not be left within a 100-foot buffer zone. Yeah, in fact, we're right, as you can see, the 100-foot buffer zone line cuts through the half of the field, a third. I'll wait for any other questions at the agent.
So you did you just buy the property?
6 years ago.
6 years,
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah.
When we were doing the rail line inspections, a lot of those areas, particularly on that property, were identified as potential vernal pools. And there was some ATV use and some filling of wetland and cutting and clearing of vegetation. Was that before you, or?
Yeah, the family that lived there before, they did a lot of ATV riding back there. And they had several jumps, I guess, set up and paths set up. They even had a little cut through to get up to the rail line.
Okay, but that's not you're
No.
not doing that.
No.
Okay, with with some of the leaf and branch debris that you're doing, maybe we could meet together on the site and I can show you some of those areas just to make sure you're not going to put any compost material into the wetland or the vernal pool, or if some of that can be removed, that's great, but now that I know you're not the one doing that.
Yeah.
That's a little
Well,
better.
also, I just found out that there's a waste disposal site in Norton that I can bring
Yep.
the debris to.
On West Hodges.
Okay, yeah, so
Yep.
I'm gonna do that as I can.
Okay.
A trailer load at a time, and I'll try to get it, that's the other thing, is I didn't know how much to remove.
Yeah, I can meet you on the site and we
Yeah.
can go over that, and then you can take all the crap out of there. you
Yeah,
like.
yeah.
Okay.
We did bring that to his attention,
Yep.
knowing that the commission would be looking at that, obviously, as I'm flagging the wetland. We saw two areas along that pool directly
Yeah.
to the rear here. And we knew that was going to be, and also talking to Craig, he says, well, remove it up front. I said, I don't want to touch it anymore that been touched, let's get it in front of the commission and
Yep,
discuss.
the little bit that you raked out of the way was a positive step, and then just before you do any more, then we can meet on site,
Yeah.
just to make sure you don't take too much or.
Yeah, sure. I would appreciate that, yes.
Dumping.
Yeah, I also bought
Yep.
the markers, the concrete markers to put on the ground for the 25-foot barrier. I didn't know where to put them.
Oh,
Yeah.
You might
yeah.
be talking out of turn, but
Sorry.
we did notice that, I'm sorry, that you do have some zone, a marker zone.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I have the markers, I provide them to
Oh,
you.
oh,
They're
okay.
aluminum markers, and it's typically a post and rail fence.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because it's relatively inexpensive, but it's still a solid barrier that you wouldn't accidentally go beyond.
Okay.
So you'll probably see a number of those post and rail fences around town. It's pretty common now, but I have the markers for you. You don't.
Okay.
We'll find another use for that comment.
That,
Yeah,
But thank you for that.
yeah.
Do you need to do inspection then? Before we-
No, I did the inspection today. Yeah, the pool itself is not a problem.
So, did you have any
Yep.
questions, Dan?
No questions.
Jean? No. Lisa? Julian? No one's out there, so, get a motion to close?
Yeah.
Do we not have a file number?
Oh, we do have a file number.
Oh.
1049.
Okay. I'll make a motion to close the public hearing for file number 250-1049.
Second.
Lisa makes a motion to close the public hearing for file 250-1049, seconded by Julian. All those in favor? Aye. So moved.
Thank you very
Okay.
much for being in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You too. Thank you.
That goes with it.
The next hearing is a notice of intent for file 250-1037, Next Grid Redwood LLC, 54 Plain Street, continued from the September 9th, 2019 meeting.
They requested a continuance to 10/7.
Second.
Julian makes a motion to continue the public hearing for file 250-1037 to the October 7th meeting, seconded by Dan Pearson. All those in favor?
Aye.
So moves. The next hearing is an abbreviated notice of resource area delineation, file 250-1030, East Hodges Street, continued from the September 19th meeting.
Also requested continuance to 10/7.
So moved.
Second.
Dan Pearson makes a motion to continue the public hearing for file 250-1030, seconded by Julian. All those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Next hearing is a notice of intent for file 250-1032, Oak Street, continued from the September 9th, 2019 meeting.
requested continuance to 10/7.
So moved.
Second.
Julian makes a motion to continue the public hearing for file 250-1032 to the October 7th meeting, seconded by Dan Pearson. All those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Okay, this is not actually a hearing, right? We closed
Yeah,
last time?
Condyne's not actually a hearing. We closed at the last meeting, but they're in like the next heading, sign and issue the order of conditions
So
that
we-
we're gonna go over tonight.
Okay.
So we have Horsley Witten's letter. I have to,
Yes.
yeah, you have to
Lisa
recuse.
recuses.
And you guys, you still have a draft order that we have to go over because I have not finished it. That's for you, Jeff. And you already have their letters, but you can take them if you want.
Horsley Witten, yes.
Yeah, okay. So Jeff, the public hearing's closed, so the commission will be going over the conditions, but there might be spots where we just say, can you confirm the amount of alteration? Or the dates of things? Do you wanna do that, or do you want me to email Mark tomorrow?
I think it's probably to be precise, other than what's in the letter that we have.
Yeah.
Those numbers are written in the letter, I think. And Horsley Witten's?
Yeah. And from whatever I have in the draft permit, we'll just wanna confirm those numbers, so should I do that with Mark?
Do it with Mark, yes.
Okay.
It's on page 3 of their letter down the bottom.
Okay. Most of it, well, I don't know, where do you want to go? So Horsley Witten's letter, so I was out most of Thursday and Friday. So their letter came in Friday, there was a change this morning, minor, just a plan date or, so then it was forwarded to you today. So I don't know if you want to take a minute to read it if you haven't read it yet.
So this is different from your email attachment.
Today, I forwarded it to you.
That's the real one.
That's the correct one. Yep. Yeah, but I don't know if everybody had a chance to read it, so I don't know if you want to go through it. It's 4 pages, so if you go through that. Just take a second there.
Remember last time we had the wrong copy? We got the right copy this time. It's not the agenda. So I forgot remember last time we had like a wrong copy? Okay. So do the next one.
on the September 20 letter.
Does anyone have any questions about the letter? Confusion?
Yeah, just let me know when you're ready.
I'm ready. Anything you disagree with? Question?
Yeah, so you're just reviewing the letter and deciding if you agreed with the applicant and that they met the extent practicable.
Right.
Yeah. They did the most that they could to meet stream crossing standards.
Right.
That's what you're deciding from that letter.
You guys still reading over there? You ready to go to conditions?
Fine.
You ready to go?
We'll make that one, you probably want to say that, if you agree that they met the stream crossing standards to the extent practicable.
So let's take an individual vote. Do you feel that they met the stream crossing standards, Dan?
To the extent practical.
To the
To the
maximum
maximum
extent
extent
practicable.
practicable.
Yes.
Yes.
Julian, yes. And I agree.
So on page 3, they did give suggestions for the condition, right? So include in the conditions that you agreed that they met maximum extent practicable. The alteration amounts will confirm with Mark. Just I'm making notes as we go here. Okay. Next page was about condition for BVW restoration, which we'll see in an earlier letter from Horsley Witten, and a condition about construction monitoring and oversight by a qualified wetland professional. And so this September 20th letter says, by the way, we gave you suggested conditions in August 9th. So that's what you have, August 9th. And if you want to skip to page 3, at the bottom, that's where they have suggested findings. So you can put Horsley Witten's letter, that page 3 of 11 on one side, and then the draft order conditions next to it, and then we can sort of shimmy back and forth between the two. Just let me know when you're ready.
So we're talking, as far as bank goes, specifically, condition number 8.
Yeah, I don't know if you want, do you want to go through 1 through 7, or you're good with those? They're pretty, these are the findings, so we are tying it into the Blue Star Business Park from the previous permits and all the other file numbers that go along with it, as we did with all the other permits. So it's just making sure everything's tied together and cross-referenced for 1 and 2. 3 is just notice that we did the peer review and we got certain letters back from Horsley Witten. You had public hearings, on-site inspection. The wetland resource areas were verified in 2 previous permits, so we did mark them down here, and then we start talking about bank. So number 7. So you have Horsley Witten's suggested condition on bank, and then what we typically put, and then I sort of truncated Horsley Witten's to what's italicized, unless you want me to put everything that they wrote. I pretty much combined Horsley Witten's suggestion with what we normally write. Okay. I didn't think there would be a big issue there. I didn't want to have to copy all of that all over again for stuff we already had. So number 8. is about, bank alteration for installation of the replacement culverts. And so from previous documentation that we were given, culvert 1 alters 12 linear feet of bank, and these are things I need to confirm with Mark just to make sure it's correct, as Jeff mentioned. Culvert 2 is 12 linear feet, culvert 3 had 17 linear feet, but that may have been from the box culvert, not from the latest revised plan that puts it back at the elliptical precast concrete. And then there's a certain amount of bank alteration from the road widening on the south side from station roughly 10.5 to 13. And so we just want to make sure we have that correct number. Total bank alteration is 76 linear feet, which is what Horsley Witten also has. So that appears to be correct. We just need to confirm the amount on D. Condition in that spot. BVW, bordering vegetated wetlands. Horsley Witten doesn't actually have BVW listed. But I think the most recent revised 3 of the notice of intent has BVW alteration. So that's just amounts we want to confirm with Mark before that goes out. Wetland replication amounts we want to confirm as well on number 12. Same thing with land under water bodies and waterways. 13, that's our standard finding, and then the italicized part came out of Horsley Witten's letter on page 4 of 11.
Spelling on 19.
Good, where are you?
Page 3,
here it
second
is.
line.
Yep. Thank you. We'll confirm land under water body alteration for the culvert and the road widening and the full amount, 90 square feet. Uh, 15 is bordering land subject to flooding, and we talked about how that was identified in the 2 ANRAD files. And it was identified as 73.5 foot contour from the flood study. That's consistent with the other projects. And then the italicized part is what I took out of Horsley Witten's suggested condition. And then the proposed alteration amounts in 16, we'll just,
Bottom
oh,
line
sorry.
15 should be important. Flood control.
Thank you.
That's only on a few of them.
Dan's slacking on the spelling over there.
I am slacking.
Still awake over there?
Still awake. All I'm here for dinner is a plan.
16 will confirm those amounts and locations. Okay. 17 is riverfront area. So again, italicized part is what we took out of Horsley Witten's letter, suggested conditions.
A couple of mine.
Sure. Yeah, what do you got?
Project, third from the bottom, the project.
Thank you.
Stormwater.
Stormwater, second line from the bottom.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then next line up with should be will. Third line from the bottom, at the end, will need.
Will me, thank you. They gave me the Word version, so now I can just copy paste. I was in a rush trying to make sure we got all of this. Okay, so 18 is the amounts, and we'll confirm that. So some of these are pretty standard. 19 is, it's in the ACEC and the sole source aquifer. Portions of the project qualify as limited project for existing public roadway widening of less than 1 lane and improving inadequate drainage systems. Stormwater management requirements for redevelopment have been met. Stormwater management requirements for proposed new project has been met. We received public comments. So 24 is permit authorizes widening of Leonard Street by, I thought it was 6 feet, but that's, we'll just confirm that with Mark. Installation of utilities, replacement of culverts 1, 2, and 3, installation of stormwater management, replication of wetland and floodplain compensation areas. 25, I'll just confirm stormwater management bylaw was applicable, which I think it was certainly for the new portions, not necessarily, not needed. Redevelopment would have to be something different. Okay. Special conditions at 27, these are your standard boilerplate conditions until you get to 31E, which is submit a restoration plan of upstream and downstream work at the culverts. That's a suggestion from Horsley and Witten. And when we write that condition on its own, then I can clear this up and write it a little bit better in that section, but that should be submitted before the work is started.
Okay.
We'll just keep ticking through these boilerplate ones. 36. That's where we talk about the project should be monitored, and we usually request the funding for that to happen. We have that on the other project conditions. That doesn't appear to have been an issue. Erosion and sediment control, these are all the standard conditions. Down through general construction, those again are all standard conditions. Then we get to stormwater management section. These are all standard conditions. Number 54, we just need to make sure we have the operation and maintenance plan as an attachment. We just include that as the attachment. Do you know if he put that on the plan itself or if it was a separate paper?
I think it was separate.
A separate
Yeah,
paper?
separate.
Okay. Okay. So then we get to culvert installation, and that's when we're gonna hop back over to page 5 of Horsley Witten's letter. So page 5, the first bullet is this restoration plan condition, and you should probably read through that just to make sure you're okay with it. If you are, I'll plug it in to the order as number 56. August 9th letter, page 5 of 11. Yep, the first bullet.
Fine by me.
Sorry?
It's fine by me, we can pull one. You agree?
Fine. Yes.
Did you read it?
No.
Is basically come up with a stabilization plan. so that after it's disturbed and the new culvert is in, it will be vegetated
Right.
and not cause erosion.
Right. You good?
So that would be 51.
That would be number 56.
Oh, it's all saying we agree with what they suggested.
Yeah, I'm just gonna copy paste at that point, but I wanted to make sure we had that placeholder in there so we could discuss it. Okay, 57, their bullet is the construction sequence for the culvert restoration and then outlined in an email. Well, nobody's gonna go back and look for an email, so I copied and pasted what
That
was
was
in
from
the
the email?
email
Okay.
in number 57.
Yep. That works.
Okay. Okay, then bullets 3 and 4 would just be plugged into the draft order if you read through them and you're okay with them.
Yep. No, just kind of bullet 4 on page 511.
Good. Yeah. That's 59.
Yes.
Correct.
Following the first one.
59.
I'm fine with that.
Following, we can actually make that a lot less wordy and just, just say that, that they're following the restoration plan.
Yeah.
Where are we now?
Bullet 4 on page 511 is the Jose Witten suggestion for condition 59, which we can reduce.
Yeah, I don't need to
Make
repeat
that
the same
pretty-
thing all over again. We'll just
Okay.
say, you need to follow the plan.
That's fine.
Okay. Then we are into wetland replication and floodplain compensation. And so the scheduling of that, it should be, those two areas should be constructed and stabilized prior to filling wetland and floodplain compensation.
That's standard, right?
That's standard, yeah.
I'm saying.
61, obviously I copied this from a different permit application, a different permit. And so I just need to pull out the wetland replication and floodplain compensation description that the applicants provided and just list it appropriately. But that also seems like it was on the plans, not necessarily a separate document, correct? It's on the plans this time? Yeah, okay. So then we'll just reference as it's listed on the plans. And so then we wouldn't need an attachment because it's already on the plans.
Yep.
Okay. 62, 63 are all standard replication, compensation conditions. The only thing you might want to specify is when it needs to be replication and
Can you go back to
restoration.
63?
Yep, 63.
Where's the proposed driveway? Is that the road?
You know what, that was an old, hang on.
Okay.
Okay, show a dog and appropriate elevation. You would say in the roadway,
Okay.
proposed roadway,
Got it.
or for the proposed roadway. Um, 64 is really about the overall construction sequence. The standard condition is sort of, the point of that is to make sure it happens early on in the project and not when you finish the project. So if you have a time frame you would like to suggest, obviously not 2016. That was from a previous one. But we usually, we have it in the first growing season.
It's gonna happen much spring.
By the spring?
First growing season, I would say.
Correct. Okay. So we can say June 1, 2020? That's within your...
Prior to, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Prior to.
Okay, then 65, 66 are standard.
Yep.
I just want to make sure Horsley Witten didn't have something else we were supposed to include. I don't think they did. Other relevant conditions. So this is about no disturbance zone, where it's an actual road project. I don't know that you need this, so.
Right.
Yeah, okay. So you want to cut that?
Yeah.
Okay. Cut out 67.
68.
The driveway shoulder.
You know what? It's from another permit, so utilities are proposed underground. Yeah, this is about the Taunton Ave driveway.
Would you want to keep that for the gas and Verizon or any electric overhead, right?
Within the limit of work, so.
Within the limit of work.
Yeah, utilities within the limit of work, but instead of driveway shoulder, I guess it would be roadway shoulder.
Or just make the roadway.
Should utilities be modified and installed above ground instead? Vegetation maintenance. I mean, you're talking about gas and water and sewer, right? We're not talking about electric.
Electric's above.
Yeah, so none of these.
And phone and fibers above.
Oh, phone and fibers above.
But that's already there, it's not gonna be
Correct.
changed at all, right? It's part of your project, so.
The poles are being adjusted, that's
Right.
that's part of the project.
So then we would just leave the first sentence and cut the rest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So 69 and 70, and even 71.
And 71. Yep.
Standard.
Those were standards, yeah, but they don't really apply, so those are being cut.
Okay.
And are there really exotic species out there that they would be responsible for? The invasive species?
Yeah.
To the road?
Yeah, they'll be removing most of that anyway. So then it's just making sure it doesn't pop up when they stabilize the site. That's a standard condition. Same with landscaping, they're not planting anything
Right.
other than what's required. And they don't have any lighting, so. Yeah, you don't have any lighting as part of that, so
No, it's all
74.
Neighbors already there. That's-
74 can come out, and then I'll just have to go through and pick out the perpetual conditions.
Okay. Wow.
Unless anybody can think of anything else.
You wanna add more?
No, I don't want to add more, but,
Are we ready for?
We are.
All right.
you are.
I move the draft order of conditions be approved as discussed. File number 250-1035.
Come on, guys, stay with me. It's late, but.
Second.
Thank you. All right, Julian makes a motion to approve the order conditions for file 250-1035 as discussed, seconded by Gene. All those in favor?
Aye.
So moved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A long process for all of us. So we look forward to making one of the best projects going forward.
And now you have to, and now you have to build it.
We have to build it, so we look forward to seeing all of you at the groundbreaking.
Sounds good.
We get moving, all right? Again, we appreciate it.
Take care, guys.
Thanks.
It's a long
Thank you for
road
coming in.
for all of us.
Yeah. Thank you, you too. All right, that bad boy's signed.
All right, that's the last.
Yeah, let's see, it's kind of the last thing. Draft minutes. I don't think did we send you any minutes?
No.
Okay.
And since we could approve all the minutes from now on, that makes it a lot easier going forward. The whole time we can say, well, he's not there that time, he wasn't there, but now we can just do all of them. That's great.
Right, I know, it's just, it doesn't make any
It doesn't make
sense to me.
sense. I
If
could
you
approve
weren't
them.
there, how can
Yeah.
you say that's what happened? But, okay. I mean, that makes it easier for us to approve them, but.
For all these years, we've been saying if you missed a meeting, you couldn't approve the meeting minutes, but.
Well, why would we say, whatever?
Okay, old business. DP file number 250-1036 was Next Sun appeal of the order of conditions. We had the on-site meeting last Wednesday. Town council was there, our consultant was there, a number of abutters showed up. Because they need a state permit now and they've tripped the ACEC threshold, they will have to go before MIPA before DEP can issue their superseding order of conditions. So it's gonna take a whole lot longer.
Can
I
ask you a
do
question?
need, yeah,
So we issued an order of conditions.
correct.
They appealed it. They're gonna
Correct.
get a new order of conditions from the DP that's gonna have nothing at all to do with the conditions that we applied, or does DP take that into consideration, that there's already an order in place?
Do you want the real answer or the one I'm supposed to tell you?
That they do?
They may or may
They
not
may or may
take
not.
our
Okay, that's- I'm just
conditions.
curious.
It's highly unlikely, but,
I was just curious.
I do have to write the draft letter from the site inspection and about their appeal.
Okay, thank you.
Letter to be done, and we'll copy town council on that in case she has anything to add. She actually spoke up quite a bit and made some good points for us, which I think was very helpful. It was good to have Amy there. The other one is DEP 25983, that's Island Brook. Appeal of our order of conditions. So we have John Chessie is reviewing the latest plans and the stormwater. DEP had asked for additional information from the applicant, basically telling them to revise the plans the same way we've been asking for the 3 years we were reviewing the project. Their Island Brook's letter came back saying, oh, we addressed all the things you asked for, which were all the things we had been fighting with them for over 3 years. But we'll go through it, and then we'll also have a draft letter proposed for that. New business, don't forget, Saturday is our open house at Edith
11 a.m.
Reed.
Do you have enough
So,
parking?
we should, yeah. There's not that many people signed up.
Big turnout, Jim. Huge.
But it will
At least
be,
5 cars.
it will be fun. Yes, there will, you'll be parking out back, 11 a.m.
What happens?
It's like-
What goes down? What is-
You're gonna walk the property, you're gonna look at all the improvements we've made to the lodge.
What balloons?
No balloons. No balloons. I'm doing the walk, so it'll be a 1 mile walk of the property just to show the different areas.
Oh my goodness, a full mile?
Full mile.
Good workout.
There's also a raffle and prizes, so, you may want to attend. Site inspections, we've already talked about. The other violations, we can skip through, there's nothing new on that. I did get a complaint about Sportsman's today, but I drove by and I didn't see any cutting, so I don't know that there's anything to follow up on that. Not observed. And that's it for me.
Awesome.
If anybody has anything else, I did submit our town report, by the way. Do you want me to send that to you so you can see what it says?
Sure. I would like to see this.
Okay.
What's the process for the wetland bylaw?
For the,
Wetland bylaw? What has to happen next?
well, first I have to have a little bit of breathing room to even think about a wetland bylaw. Now that Leonard Street's out.
Are we pushing for full-time in fall town meeting?
We did request that.
So if we get a little bit more breathing room to get that.
It would give me a lot more breathing room
Yeah.
if we have that. Yeah.
Yep. Motion to adjourn. Thank you, Julian. Seconded by Dan. All those in favor? Aye.